The great right-wing populists that infest radio and television, so they like to identify themselves. If you think they care about you, you poor, miserable Republican voting jerk, I've got news for you. Matter of fact, I'm going to share it with you in a second here. But the bill that Bunning was holding up, not only was it about construction jobs, it was about COBRA subsidies, and also doctors. It would have spared doctors from cuts in Medicare payments. He blocked that also. It would have extended small business loans and flood insurance programs. He blocked that also. So when these Republican sons of bitches try to convince you that they're for small business and freedom and liberty, please, for Christ's sake, at some point you have to stop believing these lies. Oh, maybe you don't. That's right. If you're a Republican, you are physically incapable of stopping your belief in this sick, nasty system that's eating you and your family alive, aren't you? God. The AP reported yesterday that the legislation blocked by Bunning not only would provide laid-off workers with subsidies to help pay health insurance premiums through the COBRA program, but also the bill would spare doctors from a 21% cut in Medicare payments and extend the small business loan program and the national flood insurance program. So if you're a doctor and you consider yourself a Republican, Jim Bunning was reaching into your pocket and taking money away from you. 2 million families were on the verge of losing local TV access because a copyright law that was expiring that this bill was going to renew. Now, right-wing media, the Nazis that infest radio and television, defended him. Tucker Carlson, on the March 2nd edition, that's today, of Fox and Friends, co-host Gretchen Carlson, not Tucker Carlson, Gretchen Carlson, said of Jim Bunning, quote, "I propose to you that this is what a lot of people in the American public want their politicians to do right now. Speak your own convictions, for God's sake. You disagree with something? Don't worry about all the other backlog kind of stuff going on. This is what he believes. He's taking a stand, and I'm all for that. You unconscionable bitch, what happens if you lose your job at Fox, huh? What if you have to draw unemployment and say, oh, never mind, forget it." Laura Ingraham, also on Fox and Friends. Fox contributor Laura Ingraham said, "I promise you, if you poll tested that Bunning statement across this country, people would be standing up and cheering him and saying, 'We need more people like Jim Bunning.'" And then this half-witted co-host, Steve Doocy, said Bunning's point is, look, we are out of money. How are we going to pay for this stuff? And then the other jerk that sits on that program in the morning, Brian Kilmeade, claimed there's a lot of other people who maybe are on the rolls that don't want to get off the rolls because they know it's going to be extended because it's politically unpopular to stop it. He's talking about the unemployment rolls. So if you're a Republican and you've been drawing unemployment, if you're a doctor and you vote Republican and you get Medicare payments, if you're thinking about opening a small business, you've been voting Republican, are you out of your goddamn minds? What does it take to move some of you people, huh? On the March 1st edition of Fox News Special Report, host Brett Baer said, quote, "The idea of buying only the things you can actually pay for hasn't been a big seller in Washington for decades. And right now, one Republican senator is catching all kinds of grief for taking a position that millions of American families have to live by." Newsbusters. In a March 2nd Newsbusters post, Newsbusters is a sub-basement sewer filled with rats, roaches, and human excrement. But somebody there named Brent Baker wrote, quote, "A retiring senator not facing re-election stood up last week for principle, insisting new federal spending be covered by a matching reduction elsewhere. But instead of hailing Senator Jim Bunning as a maverick, making sure the ruling party adheres to its promise of new spending will be paid for, television network journalists on Monday night painted him as an ogre." focusing on the presumed victims of delayed spending, end quote. If Newsbusters is a toilet full of human excrement, roaches, and rats, then Brent Baker, who writes for them, well, you get the drift. Limbaugh. Yesterday's edition of his sick, sewer-like show, Limbaugh said, "Now, who knew? Who knew? But if you look at this story, folks, this is the worst thing that could have ever happened. 2,000 federal workers are going to be furloughed. And there might be a delay in some unemployment benefits being paid. Oh, my God, this is the worst thing that's ever... Who knew, folks? That one lone senator from the minority party could wreak so much damage to our economy. Unemployment advocates are calling for Jim Bunning to be removed from the Baseball Hall of Fame." In a February 27th National Review online blog post entitled Senator Bunning's Unappreciated Gifts, former National Review economics editor and Cato Institute senior fellow Alan Reynolds wrote, quote, "Senator Jim Bunning blocked extended unemployment benefits beyond their scheduled expiration on February 27th. That thwarted bill would also have put off, again, a scheduled 21% cut in Medicare payments to physicians. Democrats were outraged. But why?" And then he went on to claim the evidence is overwhelming that extending unemployment benefits from 6 months to nearly 2 years has raised the unemployment rate by a percentage point or two. How can Democrats possibly object to saving money sooner rather than later? You filthy, rotten bastard. Unemployment. The unemployment rate by a percentage point or two. Do you know how many people that is, you filthy pig? Do you know how many people that is? Another red state sewer toilet, that's another one, redstate.com, I think. A blogger there wrote, last night, while most Americans were watching the Olympics, Senator Jim Bunning was standing strong for the American people on the floor of the Senate. Oh, it won't be portrayed as such, believe me. Bunning took to the floor to object to a unanimous consent request to call up and pass the House-passed extension of a number of expiring so-called stimulus and other benefit programs because Bunning dared to ask the simple question of how these extensions would be paid for. How's come Bunning never asked questions about how tax cuts would be paid for and a war in Iraq would be paid for and a war in Afghanistan would be paid for? Huh? My God. Bob Corker, Republican of Tennessee, John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, have supported Bunning's insanity. And Senator Jeff Sessions, the one that talks like he's got a mouthful of squirrel testicles, said he respects Bunning for standing like a solid rock. This is what Bunning said. He stood like a solid rock and didn't give in. He said, I'm not agreeing to it because you could pay for it. It's increasing the debt on my 42 grandchildren. And he didn't agree to it. You know, every now and then somebody stands up in the Senate and says, I've had enough, and I'm not going to say yes this time. And I respect him for the courage he showed. Yeah, well, that figures. How does this guy talk with a mouthful of squirrel testicles? Squirrel nuts. I have no idea. 400,000 workers lost their benefits over this last weekend. Another 1.5 million would have lost their benefits had the Senate not dumped this pig bastard in the toilet where he belongs.